Okay. So for our next panel, Crowd Strategies for Media Groups, I would like to introduce Glenn Dixon, our contributing editor and its moderator, who will introduce his panelists.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Cloud Strategies for Media Groups. The potential of public cloud technology to transform broadcast workflows has been a hot topic at this conference and other media gatherings for several years. Probably the hottest topic before AI. Now we talk about that a lot too, but as we heard on the last panel, very interesting. But broadcasters have evolved past just discussing the cloud simply in the theoretical sense, as major networks and station groups have already successfully shifted key functions like content ingest and playout to cloud compute. Those early cloud implementations have also proven that on-premise hardware will still play an essential, if reduced, role in station operations going forward. Today we'll discuss the technical, operational, and financial implications of moving to the cloud with our panel of experts. Joining me are Shilpi Ganguly, VP IT and Cybersecurity for Allen Media Group, Janet Gardner, President, Perspective Media Group, Mike Kralik, SVP and CTO, Sinclair, and Marcy Lefkowitz, industry consultant and former VP of Technology and Workflow Strategy for Disney Media Entertainment and Distribution. For the audience, we'd like to make this experience as interactive as possible, and we will reserve time for your questions towards the end of the session. And I'd like to thank my panelists for arranging themselves in exact order that I had on my page. It's made my life very easy. Anyway, let's start with Mike. As we discussed before, Sinclair was an early adopter of cloud playout for its diginets. And in the past 2 years, you've also moved your content ingest workflows to the cloud. Can you describe Sinclair's overall strategy in moving broadcast workflows to the cloud and update us on your most current project, which is moving linear playout of local stations to public cloud?
Sure, thanks. And thanks everybody for staying. It's late, I know. We really started, I think, like you said, our cloud journey was, the emerging networks almost 3 years ago now. But more recently, I think out of that has grown, a concept, sort of a vision for our cloud strategy that was really focused on enabling a sort of a dynamic ecosystem for our business. So focusing on the business value that cloud could provide for us. And it's not, we can almost throw cloud out the window here. It's really sort of operational strategies for media groups. It's like, how do we take the tool sets that have evolved to the remote work, the collaborative work tool sets, what's been done in virtualization and cloud. All of these come together to really enable a more dynamic ecosystem for media. And so we're taking that vision, helping to create something that can be flexible for the business. And right now we've launched our first market in Cloud Playout as of last week. We'll launch another one soon. And but this journey is not going to be it's not going to be a couple of weeks. It's going to take us a few years to get through this.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and we'll drill into some detail on your overall process a little bit. Shilpi, how is Allen Media working with the public cloud today? And are you running any broadcast workflows there yet, like Mike is at Sinclair?
So I'll back up a little and introduce myself. I head up IT and cybersecurity across the organization, and I partner with great individuals who have the expertise around broadcast. So we've been in the public cloud circuit for a bit. That is more around the OTT side of things. We were an AWS shop. We have since then been transitioning to GCP over the past 18 months. We're also a pretty heavy SaaS shop. So that's our public cloud footprint. As far as OTA, we are pretty much at the tipping point of where we are establishing a narrative across the organization on what the benefits are of transitioning to the cloud. Do we run a proof of concept? now that we have an enterprise relationship with Google, we understand the product, but it is going to be a significant cultural shift for us, given OTA is extremely different from OTT. There's distribution method differences. The organics are different. Products are deeply coupled. So to understand that whole mix, talks through concerns around availability and latency, which I'm sure you will cover, is the proof's in the pudding. So we are in that cultural shift phase where we'd like to now establish a POC with GCP. That's where we are.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the considerations in moving platforms, which I know you can speak to. Janet, what trends in cloud usage are you seeing the most among your clients?
Well, one of the key ones is hybrid, which is interesting because, traditionally a lot of, especially large broadcasters, it was cloud first, cloud native, and now I also want to be in a hybrid ecosystem. I want to make sure that I'm not all in only with one vendor, but that doesn't mean necessarily that they're going to say, as, we just discussed, I'm a Google, versus I'm a GCP versus I'm AWS versus I'm Azure. It's more, I have functions that run better in one place or the other, in one cloud or the other, or on-prem, like DR, which Mike will speak about, which may also run in the cloud, and playout may run on-prem. I need to be able to have that flexibility because I'm building an ecosystem of many platforms across my supply chain. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is people are actually finding that the cost associated with the cloud is not necessarily as cost effective as they may have thought. And a lot of that is not necessarily just the cloud vendor's fault. It's the way the supply chains, the way the workflow work for people in those areas.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and realizations about cost happen when you stop talking about it theoretically, right? You start implementing. Marcy, to that point, where do you see the use of the cloud bringing the most benefit in broadcast workflows today?
So I will say that I think that the value proposition is really different for everybody. And there has been, in the early part of the cloud journeys in the major broadcasters and in the large station groups as well, there was a little bit of a pushing of the envelope just to see what the technology could do and what's possible. And we all bled a little bit, but you take one for the team here and there to sort of see what's possible. But in terms of the value proposition, I think it really has to do with the complexities of individual capital cycles. You have to examine, like, where do I have pain points, and can moving workflows into the cloud alleviate those pain points for where you are right now? Like, what's up for a refresh? Like, do you want to buy, it's as simple as, if I'm up for a refresh cycle, am I going to buy more hardware? Or am I going to see if this is already a mature cloud workflow and see if you can migrate it at that point? I'm a fan of taking the opportunity when you identify a workflow that you want to bring to the cloud of improving, making other ancillary organizational and workflow improvements at the same time. It's a really good opportunity to do that. So for some people, it's a real estate play. I want to consolidate real estate. That's a very expensive part of some people's ecosystem. And maybe they actually do have the flexibility to be able to downsize and get some of that money back. Then playout is definitely, if you can abstract your either production control or master control and give back, that's very boring real estate to be housing. Archives are very boring real estate, but storage is expensive,
To build on that, that's a very significant cost driver that we see, especially with all the mergers with the various organizations these days. We have a lot of replication of playout facilities, of libraries, of all of that area. So that's been a very significant driver of migration of workflow and operational support into the cloud.
I happen to be a fan right now. It's like my latest kick, but I happen to be a fan right now of sort of end-to-end media supply chain, migrating to the cloud. The nice thing about it is that you actually, as opposed to our old-fashioned capital cycles where you really had, these were like year-long financial decisions and then potentially 2 or 3 year-long purchasing cycles. You can identify incrementally a small place to start, and in a matter of months as opposed to years, kind of do a POC, see if it works, take a low-risk workflow, move it up, and then actually, pull the trigger and say like, yep, all right, I'm going to do that now. Like, spin up a fast channel, see if it works. If it works, actually put it on the air. Don't do it on-prem. And then you build your sea legs and sort of start to identify use case by use case incrementally what makes sense for your organization at any given time.
Yeah, thanks. Well, and the point you made about real estate, when you talk to different size companies about the benefits of the cloud, you hear a lot more favorable comments from the really big companies compared to maybe some of the smaller station groups, and some of that can just be a function of price per square foot, in the different markets. Shilpi, can you talk a little bit about your move from AWS to GCP, and what are some of the key considerations for a broadcaster in moving from one cloud platform to another? Because that is something that you always hear as a concern. Well, I move these workflows from on-premise to the cloud, and then I decide, well, I want to move to another hyperscaler. How feasible is that?
So for us, we are yet to make that broadcast journey, right? For us, our streaming portfolio was what was in AWS, and the timeline has since then extended. The timeline was within a year, we'll have a lift and shift to GCP. That has now extended into end of this year. But that was due to multiple reasons, one including upskilling. Our team did not have the skill sets that were required to architect within GCP. So upskill your team. Make sure you have the partnership with your CSP. And we did. We used some of that. And upskilling within the team, training them up, and that took a little bit. We also did not want to do what we had done in AWS, as in build as we go. We wanted to set up a foundational that went from nomenclature to load balancing, architecture. Make those foundational decisions first before you start putting in your CI/CD pipeline, for instance. We used infrastructure as code so we could scale a lot more effectively. Had not done that in AWS. So we built off the lessons learned, as in the build as you go. There is still the build as you go, build the plane as it flies, right? But we tried to do a few things right last year, as in upskilling, training, as well as taking about 2+ months in establishing the foundational concepts. We do have multiple business units within Allen Media Group. So there was segregation that needed to occur architecturally. There was a topology. As we all know, cloud billing is a nightmare. So that is not even an exaggerated statement, but
I've heard it before.
So we had to take those, tie that and weave that back into how we were going to publish the workloads. Have we checked off everything we needed to? It's work in progress. So that's the OTT side of things. As far as the broadcast, like I said, we are using the stories, right? Using the benefits, the scale up, the scale out. The fact that you can spin up, I think, Marcy, you mentioned it, what you need, when you need it, I can shut it down when I need it. That's the flexibility. So there are stories, there are success stories that we're using from that transitioning, which is actively happening with our broadcast teams. And I absolutely agree. Can we do it one piece at a time? We don't have to build the whole ecosystem out. But are there those workflows that can be identified and put in the cloud? With us, we do not have the luxury of a hybrid architecture or a hybrid CSP environment. We do have a relationship with Google. They are tremendously invested in us on their roster in the media and entertainment industry, and we're working very closely with them to architect as well as deploy.
Thank you. Mike, can you take us through the content pipeline project that you undertook, which is sort of the foundation, I would think, for what you're doing now with playout local stations, and maybe talk about the schedule, which, I mean, it's been pretty fast progress.
It has. So the cloud media pipeline really started for us back in October of 2021. We'll explain why exactly that date, but we started then, and really, I mean, a couple people have touched on this, that you have to build a foundational element here. You have to get into a cycle of thinking about the capital that's involved in the next cycle of servers and storage and everything else. And do you want to be in that cycle for 5 more years or 7 more years or whatever you're going to depreciate it over? You know, how are you going to get yourself into a situation where you can build the foundational elements of a transformational tool for the company? And when I say, and that doesn't have to be cloud, it is really about, I mean, I said it earlier about the collaboration tools that exist today. Everything that's gone into sort of our switch from purely broadcast engineering to more of an information technology and data-driven environment. So we built that cloud media pipeline. Initially it was let's get the content to the stations in the right format at the right time. Let's deliver it that way for the stations. Let's make sure that we understand how our media IDs are connected to the rest of the ecosystem. You know, solving a lot of those problems up front have really led us to the point we're at today, where we can launch television stations with automation and playout. If we hadn't done the foundational elements with the cloud media pipeline, we honestly wouldn't have had that. We wouldn't have been able to transition, because the pieces that Mike Palmer has built for us in that cloud media pipeline really allow us to extend. And I'll give you a quick example about the integration with AWS. That message bus that's created by the cloud media pipeline about what's happening in the pipeline is what Amagi now leverages to find out what content is available off of the traffic integration. So the traffic integration, the playlist, you know, this has become one ecosystem, but not built at once, built over time to really evolve and continue to evolve for our company. It is never intended to stay static. And I've said this before. It is 100%, created to be a continuous business, value driver, I'll say. So to continue to deliver more value for the business, because it can change. And that's that journey. It took us, at this point, it's taken us 6 months to get from contracts through the initial architecture discussions, which I'll talk a bit about more later, but through architecture, through the workforce planning, through the it is absolutely not, and this is why I say it's not just cloud, it's not just technology. This is workforce, this is finance, this is communications, this is every piece of the organization coming together to really think about how do we operate the most effective company for ourselves moving forward. So that 6 months took, that took us to that first station launch. But now it becomes, it's not, I don't like rinse and repeat, because it sort of downplays how difficult this really is to do, how difficult it is to make sure that the workflows and the processes are correct, and that the little, we dot our I's and cross our T's, but it does get to a point where we have a method for launching this market and then this market and this market. But they won't stay static. Like what we did in Raleigh, and they were our first market. What we did in Raleigh will not be the same thing that we do in Birmingham, which is the second one about to launch. It will not be the same thing that happens in Nashville, which is the third. And each of those is going to build on each other, and we're going to learn. We're going to improve the ecosystem throughout.
Just briefly, what is your rollout plan, for the rest of the group? How quickly are you hoping to turn on stations with Cloud Playout?
We roll through this. So we've already started the conversations with the 7th and 8th markets that we're going to launch on the cloud media, on the Cloud Playout. We start those conversations. We start the builds with the Magi weeks, really it's almost 2 months in advance of the station launch. But they're staged so that we can do the architecture build, that we can do we have a systems integration testing process, a user acceptance testing process, which rolls into a testing on site, which rolls into our training program, which rolls into a shadow, and then into a reverse shadow after we launch. So there's
say that 2 months sounds like nothing for something like that. It's really, if you think about how long a new technology rollout used to take, that's pretty good.
So yeah, and 2 months, but then almost every 2 to 3 weeks we'll launch a new market at this point, and that should happen. And I said this earlier, it should happen for the next 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
But make sure that he talks about what you're doing on site for DR, because I think that's the
nuts and bolts is my next question. But it's interesting. Mike and Sinclair are obviously placing a big bet, calculated bet on playout, and proving that will work as for the local stations. But as Marcy and I discussed on prep call, playout was one of the first workflows that some of the big networks did in the cloud first, and sort of the party line was that is easier to do than doing live production, and that there's benefit. In hindsight, how well did some of those bets pay off, some of the early implementations?
Talk about bleeding. So we really did bleed on master control playout, not production control, but master control. I mean, the
Project Columbus?
Yeah. So, it is a key lesson in really trying to identify the benefits before you set out to do something. When you look at the signal flow diagrams of the early days of cloud and what we needed to do in order to move all of the media out into the cloud, in order to switch it out there and then bring it back to our plant, because for broadcast, you need that something with an antenna, the signal needs to leave. It wasn't leaving from the data center back then. And back then it really was very much putting in the heavy iron that was in our data centers into a cloud data center. We were just way over our skis. The benefits weren't there, and we let our infrastructure age for so long because the technology just wasn't mature enough yet. But we did advance the tech a lot. And what we learned was that, in fact, we were able to get our cable operations in there, and it actually worked. And we were the first ones to do that. Because why? Because we could actually figure out how to get a playlist that was, where the traffic, locked 24 hours in advance. The media wasn't coming in at the last minute. There was no live. So we could sort of back up the clock in order to compensate for the latency of moving the media around and around. And it worked, and it saved money, but it also got us, it built our confidence a little bit. It also gave us the confidence to say, well, we're not doing this with the network yet, because that going back and forth between live and pre-recorded, that was actually tough. And on the network, you do that all the time. Between your primetime shows and your news and your local, for example, and the timing, it was kind of a nightmare. And also getting late changes was kind of a nightmare. But, time marches on, and now these problems are not what they used to be, but it was definitely painful.
To set the timing, that was approximately 10 years ago that started Project Columbus.
You remember that well.
Yes, and some of that was very first vendors and forced the initial development of that based upon the vision of Project Columbus.
Yeah, but one of the things that is still a consideration today, and now, like when I think about how mature this stuff is. You can do creative work in the cloud now. And there's real advantage there for some people. You can do, like, Remy got mature. Everybody was saving money by not sending all of their crews to an event and just bringing the signals back. And then we realized, like, oh, we've got the whole Remy thing down. Now maybe we could just put that stuff in the cloud and nobody even notices, really, like, from an operational standpoint. It is, but the thing that is still the same is getting the timing right, not in terms of the frames and the switching, but in terms of when is it right? When does it make sense to take some risk if the workflow's not mature? Because you will still have pain in that transition. If you can't get off of the old, then your aging infrastructure and workflows are not going to get any better while you're waiting for the cloud thing to mature. So you do have to really make sure that you're prepared. It's that transition moment. That's the tough one. And that's the expensive one too, because you're still paying for the old while you're paying for the new.
While you're investing in the new. Mike, you say you've been looking at doing this for a while. You have some aging on-premise infrastructure at these stations that was handling playout that, you didn't want to replace with more on-premise gear. Can you talk about what was the big thing that was holding you back from moving to cloud playout? And can you talk about the solution you found to solve that in terms of redundancy locally?
Sure. I don't think I think it's a little bit of the maturity of the ecosystem. We spent a lot of time. We really spent 3 years doing a couple things leading up to this. Yeah, we didn't do this in 6 months. We started the build in 6 months and executed that. But there were years in advance that were focused on, what did we learn from our emerging networks? How do we execute that, successfully? What do we need to learn from that in terms of modification to make this effective for our company? And that was really focused on the maturity of the software ecosystem around cloud. So we were focused on cloud native. We were focused on effective cloud operations. I've said this before, so it won't be a surprise to anybody else. If you're trying to run something on Windows in the cloud, you're spending too much. And it took time for that market to mature. It took time for us to really optimize the workflows that we were going to use for cloud. I think we've gotten to the point now where, the small bit of hardware, and maybe now's a good time to talk about the hardware. The small piece of the infrastructure that we had to put back into the station is still, even that, much more flexible than anything that we could have built, even 5 years ago.
Why don't you walk us through, you take a station, you convert it to cloud playout. What does that actually mean in terms of the signal flow? You're still getting satellite feeds from the networks, for the most part, as everyone's described. And when you move playout to the cloud, what are you left with in terms of what's sitting on a rack, and what are your different redundancy tools? I know you have some within AWS and there's some on site.
Yeah, so resiliency is always like a key piece of all of this, right? So our AWS architecture is focused on multi-availability zone. So within a single region, having multiple systems to fail to each other. We're focused on multi-region, so having all of our content synchronized between different AWS regions entirely. And then we focused on this concept of performance hubs. And our performance hubs, and this is really one of the key pieces where it's been an absolute requirement that we're integrated throughout the company, because our information technology group has really come together to build these performance hubs to connect our stations to AWS. The key part of this is still going to be the network. It's always been the network. Whether it was, you still have to get the signal back to the station. So we've built a small encode, decode, what we call a ground to cloud and cloud to ground environment. We built some small switching into the station. And all of these performance hubs that I talk about connect into those small environments in the station to enable the connectivity to the station, give them flexibility on occasional use channels for content to the cloud, for getting the network to the cloud, because as much as we would like to take a network feed into the cloud, or take a network feed directly from the cloud, I'll say. Right now we're just focused on enabling the existing workflow, which is take it into the station and then get it into the automation and playout system from there. So, but we do there is a lot of encode decode from the market to the cloud using typical resiliency protocols, RIST or SRT, and capability for the station to still, master control to still control this, from an automation and playout perspective, but also do it a lot more, I'll say 70% more automated than it used to be.
Now, what's your solution to the dreaded backhoe fate? If connectivity to the station is cut, what's your fallback?
So we worked with our cloud automation. Everybody knows it's Somagi. But we worked with them early on to focus on just a small, basically a sort of what we call a survivability box. So a single server that synchronizes content can be a playout in a situation where we were to lose all network connectivity, continue to play out from that server on-prem. It is not intended to be a full automation and playout system. It's really meant to just keep us alive for a period of time, because we know from our news contribution workflows that LiveView or another type of, whether it's satellite or, it could be low Earth orbit satellite. It could be, we can provision connectivity to our station in many different ways. And we only need to survive for a period of time. The backhoe doesn't last, the problem doesn't last forever. It's just a matter of, how long do we need to last for? And I think that comes down to that whole situation on how we handle resiliency, survivability, all comes down to something I think Marcy or Janet said about the risk that's involved in this whole program. And I think we've reached an inflection point where the risk to our systems, to our processes, I'll say, and to our business from the legacy systems that still exist, for automation and playout, started to become greater than the risk of taking ourselves to the cloud, relying on the network and information technology tools that we have available to us. And that inflection point, we think we're past now. We think we're past the point where we have, we've got good cloud native tools that are enabling us to really, like I said before, this is about flexibility in the face of uncertainty. If you want to design a system that's going to be is going to work for you in the future, and is going to work for your business in terms of pivoting to innovation, other processes, you need to consider the tools, the tool sets that are available to us in the cloud.
Okay, thanks. Tomorrow we'll be talking a lot about cybersecurity, something that Shilpi's well versed in. Looking today at this move to the cloud, how does that change your approach to security across Allen Media? This is shifting of workflows to the public cloud.
So I'll start with saying something very cliched. It's still a bunch of computers somewhere else. We don't disown ourselves from our own responsibilities of securing and scaling if we were to have the same suite of servers on-prem. That said, from the broadcast partners we've had, there is a tremendous focus on, which it should be, on the availability. So anyone versed in security, we have the CIA triad that we swear by: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. With the broadcast population, availability is incredibly important. And how do we change that or underscore that across all the controls? How have we changed the strategy? We have what we call a universal control framework that is applicable and enforced across the organization. That speaks everything from access controls to what can and should be encrypted, how your firewall should be baselined, the good ports, the bad ports. And I don't think any of that will change as we establish our foundations, whether it's OTT, OTA. Now, there could be nuances in the workflows because everything is nuanced, and we may have to apply some additional controls. Scanning, patching is not possible sometimes with most of the broadcast equipment, so there could be opportunities for compensating controls. When we did go into the cloud and started talking about how to, and that was a question I had for Mike, does one station talk to the other, and how does that happen? But when we looked at it, the stations don't trust each other. We have an extremely decentralized environment that speaks to the security posture as well. The posture is different. We are pushing the baseline out as we speak. We're enforcing as we speak. So up until the point where we are baselined across the entire organization, we will remain in that segregated architecture. And that plays into how do we architect our topology in GCP. So we spend a ton of time understanding how the VPC should look, how one business unit represents itself as opposed to another. So architecturally is where I think we roll up our sleeves and change our focus. The tooling, I think Mike mentions that. How do we do it in the cloud? Maybe a little different from how we operate with on-prem infrastructure. But in terms of fundamental concepts, just stick to fundamentals. Get your CIA, get your controls, and make sure we enforce it, whether it's the cloud or on-prem.
Thanks. Obviously, we've been drilling down into the technology and the software development and security changes you made with this. Janet, can you talk about the importance of change management as part of this process, managing the people? Mike did allude to that before, but when talking to your clients, how big a challenge is that?
Now, just to set the stage, I come from a large-scale software and systems development background, and part of what our unique value proposition is we understand operations as well as the technology. And I think that's really key, right? Understanding the operational workflow, what you have, and where you want to go, to Marcy's earlier point. The biggest reasons we see failure is not because of technology. It's because the organization was not willing to adopt the change, or in some cases, the technology did not stand up to the promise that it had. However, that said, in order to have that change be effective, we've also found that you have to have both top-down, I'll call it pressure, but really vision, messaging, what's the business and operational drivers for doing something, and that continuous conversation. And you need bottom-up, real champions of the work. And if you're missing those, it tends to be the middle management that fights back, because they're the ones that are most threatened by the change. A lot of the people that are doing the work are really excited. Leadership, has made a series of promises, but the people in the middle are the ones that get things done. So that change management focus needs to be continuous, and it's not having a change management office. It is lightweight governance, to be fair. But it's not this big change management office and heavy-handed. It's what are we trying to achieve? What's the benefit to the business? What's the benefit to you? How are you going to grow? It's not fear. It's what am I going to give you? And that's really key. That's the biggest reason why we see failure, with the second exception being the technology is not really ready yet, which is another reason.
I know we're coming up to end of our time. I encourage, if any of you have a question for this group, please raise your hand or come up to the mic. I got a bunch more, but some good expertise here. Marcy, can you talk about the role of finance teams in helping to make this shift to cloud successful?
Yes. I really encourage people on this journey to not look at their finance teams in the same way. They're not just the bean counters who are, rolling up each quarter at the end of each quarter and slapping your wrists if you're over. Like, I really do encourage, just like Shilpi said, that there is you have to train your staff to understand the new technology and what is needed in terms of architecture and support. Get your finance teams on board and bring them along for the ride. They need to be your champions and your partners in this. And this is a different role for them than they have traditionally played at most large media organizations, where they were really just kind of like managing capital and OpEx in terms of what their projections are and how you did last quarter. There needs to be a team that actually understands those bills, and not just this is how much compute costs and this is how much storage costs, but operationally, what are you doing with that compute? What lives on that storage? So they kind of need to be more operationally aware than they have been in the past, so that they can actually be an advocate for you with the cloud partners. Operators, sure, like they're going to leave the meter running every once in a while. This whole, like, the promise of the cloud, oh, you only pay for what you use and you can scale up and scale down. Like, it's not that simple. And there certainly are cases where, people take the gas nozzle out of the car and like put it on the floor and leave it running, and that gets very, very expensive. But it's not, the cloud vendors want media business right now, the large ones, and they are forming partnerships on their finance side where, like, their finance people can work with your finance people to help not just understand, but bring the costs in line with a little bit, hopefully, closer to what your expectations were. And where they're not, allow you to make some choices, because, nobody's got an endless bank account. So you may have to make some tough choices if the costs aren't turning out to be really in line with what your expectations were. The nice thing about finance teams is they don't like unpredictability. Like, their life is, we're kind of used to that, and we roll with the punches and we figure out how to make things work when they don't work as expected. Finance teams really do want to help, provide that financial discipline, but they can't do it if they don't understand it. And I think their jobs are probably a little bit more interesting when you start to include them as well. I'd like to think that that's true for your finance team of the future, just like your operations and engineering and IT teams. Your finance team of the past is not necessarily your finance team of the future.
Can I say that real quick? The change management flows across every piece of the organization that enables your media supply chain, enables your automation, everything from ingest through distribution. The change management has been, to Marcy and to Janet's points, the narrative, telling the story about why of the program, understanding exactly what the impact is going to be to them, talking them through the changes and facilitating that through the information technology group, through the security group, through the finance group, through the human resources group, has been 100% critical to the success we've had so far in the change to cloud-based automation and playout. And I didn't get too much into security, but the fact that we now have a single automation and playout system in the cloud has reduced the surface area. So, it's just made a dramatic impact in the amount of surface area we have for security, that we think we're well positioned, moving forward to avoid some of the pitfalls that come from the legacy environment of more firewalls, more servers, more storage, more network connectivity.
Just to add on Marcy's point, not so much in our industry, but in other industries, there's a new role that's evolving, and it's called FinOps.
So it's starting to, it's right in our industry now too, critical.
And that we've seen financial people partner with the operations group to build out those models and then defend that spending. And now it's nice that that's becoming a recognized role that hopefully will more formally come into organizations.
So very quickly, when we started the journey, to Marcy's point, we were being expected to put in a requisition for every workload. Now, we all understand that in the cloud, when you're putting a number at the beginning of a workload creation, there is no way that we can get the right dollar amount. There's a forecast at best. There's an understanding of services that need to spin up for the workload. Fast forward it took a long time. It took about 18 months. But we did work with our operational/finance team. And now we've templatized workloads, services. This is a tariff for the service for this particular, whatever the usage is. And we've gotten better at forecasting, but it took a lot of work. And what they do now is when we run through our change management process, they look at that template and extrapolate the data. But it took us templatizing a lot of that.
And we need the vendors to actually help us with this, not just the cloud vendors, but the service providers who are providing services to us in the cloud need to get their finance teams on board with this and start to bring some of that. It can all be non-deterministic because we can't make decisions that way. But Shilpi, what I love about your sort of the magic spreadsheet that you're kind of describing where you can just start to plug numbers in is that the next column to add is, so what was the revenue that was generated from this?
Yeah.
And was it actually worth the expense? Because then we can start to tune how much, because there are sort of lower value. There are cheaper ways to do things in the cloud and more expensive ways to do things in the cloud. And maybe you have some workflows that go through the cheap one and some that go through the expensive one because the revenue is generated in there.
We just opened up AI in the cloud, and that's a whole different black box. That there are costs associated with that too. Sorry.
That's all right. We don't have to apologize. You went over.
It's my fault.
I guess we are at the end. Well, hey, thanks, guys. So that was a great conversation. Hope you all learned something about moving to the cloud, and we can do a whole other panel on bringing news into the cloud. That's done.